Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 best-selling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, our guest today is Kevin Parker. So we've had Kevin Parker on his show before, our show, the Natural Healing Show before, to talk about his wonderful book, Winning Against All Odds. Kevin Parker is a sobriety coach, a certified interventionist, and we'll talk about how important that is if you do an intervention to get somebody who knows what they're actually doing, and also a family coach. And you can find out more about Kevin Parker and his wonderful work at his website, truewarriorsuccess.com. Welcome, Kevin Parker.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. It's an absolute honor.
So, Kevin Parker, we are here to talk about something incredibly important, which is how to prevent teenage drug addiction. What causes addictions in teens?
Okay, so there's a plethora of different reasons what may cause addiction with teens. I like to say that the gateway drug for most people in addiction is trauma. Now, trauma is subjective. One person's trauma may not be another person. So it's some kind of issue that they're having in their lives that they're trying to compensate for. Most of the time, addiction comes from a lack of not feeling loved, not feeling good enough, not feeling comfortable in their own skin. All of these different type of things really kind of add to the issues that we're having with these young teens. And another big part of that is peer pressure. It is absolutely everywhere. It's running rampant through society right now.
Now, someone listening to you, Kevin Parker, might argue, well, all teenagers have issues. I mean, I was a teenager, you were a teenager. I definitely felt like I wasn't good enough. I definitely felt like I didn't fit in. I definitely had trauma. And yet some teenagers turn to drugs and others don't. What causes the ones who turn to drugs, illegal drugs we're talking about, to turn to these illegal substances?
Well, every person has human needs. There's 6 of them specifically: certainty, variety, significance, love and connection, growth, and contribution. Everybody has a different hierarchy of importance. When these needs are not being met, they try to find some kind of outlet to make them feel better for this specific cause. And a lot of people don't have good coping mechanisms or different groups or social events to keep them out of the bad places. Because if you're looking for problems, you're going to find it. Keeping your kids in different programs, keeping them around supervision, making the child know that they are being watched, there is supervision of some kind of sort, will always keep them second guessing or preventing them from actually doing the things that will be detrimental to their lives.
Great information. And as a medical intuitive healer, whenever I'm dealing with a teenager, I always I treat them as precious people, because if you or I have a bad day, there's like 100 things that I know how to do from natural healing to make myself feel better. But the teenagers, they do not have these skill sets. They haven't developed them yet. They don't know about breath work, yoga, meditation, healthy eating, or any of the 100 things that you and I know how to do. Now, how do you know if your child is using drugs?
That's a very good question. There will be definitely a difference in their behaviors because it's going to change the way that they act, the way they respond. You're going to notice mood swings. Depends if they're taking uppers or downers. If they're taking downers like Klonopin, Xanax, alcohol, marijuana, they're going to be a lot more drowsy. They may be slurring their words. They might be sleeping more. They might be trying to avoid you. They might be a little sloppy, a little sluggish. If they're taking something like methamphetamine or cocaine or ecstasy, they're going to be super hyperactive. They're going to be talking a million miles a minute. They're going to be talking nonsense. And you can also tell if you look into your child's eyes, typically if their pupil dilation is off, if they have pinpoint pupils, usually they're taking uppers, or if their dilation of their pupils are extra large, that's a telltale sign. The eyes are the windows of the soul. And if there's something wrong with the eyes of your child, there's definitely a concern. But I would really, you know, I always say that there's outliers to behaviors, but if a child acts a certain way for his whole life and then all of a sudden abruptly changes his mechanisms and his personality and changes drastically, there has to be something that caused it. And it may be a lot of the time in these days, it is drugs. Because it definitely changes your personality. It definitely changes the way you look at life. And it definitely changes the way you interact with other people.
I really appreciate what you were saying about the eyes are the windows of the soul. And when I want to look straight into someone's soul as a medical intuitive healer, I look straight into their left eye. And it's really amazing what you can perceive by looking straight into the left eye. An example that I give, and this is someone who's truly evil. If you Google Mohammed Atta, the terrorist who blew up the World Trade Center, and look at his photograph and look straight into his left eye, it's absolutely frightening. So we as humans, we can all read each other by looking straight into the left eye. Now, Kevin Parker, you wrote your wonderful book, Winning Against All Odds, about your personal recovery. And I have to compliment you. It really has been one of the best books that I have read in recent years. Really inspiring, very heartfelt. How old were you when you started using drugs? Because you speak from personal experience.
Yes, I started using drugs at 9 years old. My issue was I was bullied very, very harshly as a young kid. I was suicidal at like 5 years old. And as soon as I had the opportunity to break free from my parents and get some kind of reprieve, I took it. I was introduced to marijuana and alcohol by my older brother. And when I took it, I kind of felt like a different person. It was like putting on a mask. So it became a crutch, but it was like slapping a band-aid on a broken leg. It looked good, but it didn't do anything. It just hid my pain and ultimately made my life worse. And before I knew it, I started getting into stronger and stronger drugs until it kind of completely consumed my entire life. And I ended up homeless, overdosed, and basically dying.
And I really appreciate that you shared that you started drugs when you were 9 years old, because so many parents think, oh, my child is too young to take drugs,
Mm,
right? They can't be taking drugs. They're only, fill in the blank, what age.
yeah.
Now, what can you do to prevent your child from becoming an addict?
Excellent question. One thing is to really make sure that you're watching what your child is doing. In this day and age, there's so many different social medias, and I know parents want to give their kids privacy and all of those different things, but the fact of the matter is, you're responsible for your kids. You should have the passwords to your kids' phones. You should have the passwords to their social media accounts. I'm not saying constantly going through, but just the idea of your kids knowing that you have access to their secret conversations they might be having is a big deterrent from them actually doing these type of things. Another big deterrent I like to use with my clients when I coach a lot of adolescents, and I work with the families as well, is always have a drug test in the house.
Mm.
And when you have it, you leave it on top of the kitchen refrigerator. And you have this, and you make sure that you have a conversation with your child. Have the conversation about drugs. Have the conversation about the horrors of it. Read my book. They'll see how terrible and how drastic it can change your life and destroy everything you have. You know, go to a Scared Straight program. Explain to them, have that open conversation about the dangers of drugs, and let them know that you are watching. And if you do see anything that's out of the strange, or if you want to give them a spontaneous drug test, you're going to do it. It's not because you don't trust them, it's because you want to keep them in the straight and narrow. Just simply having that drug test on top of the refrigerator will make them second guess if they're at a party and somebody hands them a joint or a bag of drugs or whatever the case might be. They'll be like, "Oh, I'm not doing that, because if I come home and my eyes are red, or I'm acting funny, my parents might drug test me right on the spot." That'll give them that second thought about using drugs. But you got to be very open, and you also have to have the conversation with your kids that if they do use drugs, that it's okay to come to you to tell you. You don't want your kids to be afraid to say, "Mom, listen, I smoked pot for the first time." You want to be able to have that conversation openly so they feel comfortable enough to say it. Not that it's okay for that they did it, but not they're going to be terrified to tell you, because you want to be aware of what's going on with your child. So having that clear communication, having those deterrents, making sure you know what your kid is doing, and having the deterrent of the drug test are great, great tips on keeping your child from doing drugs. Another big thing is getting them into some kind of social program, getting them into sports, ballet, some kind of club, getting them around people that there is some kind of a structure to, because the idle mind is the devil's playground. And if they're constantly just hanging out on the corner or hanging out with their friends and being unsupervised and not having any structure, their minds are going to wander, and they're going to look for other ways and other sources to find pleasure, because we're all addicts of pleasure, every single one of us. People think that they're not addicts. Well, I have news for you. We're all addicts of pleasure. We make every single decision by the avoidance of pain and the obtainment of pleasure. Just because your favorite flavor of pleasure is different than mine doesn't make it any different. It just might be more healthy and more accepting. But ultimately, we're all looking for pleasure in our lives. And unfortunately, a lot of kids turn to drugs for this.
Which brings me to my next question, which is, should parents who suspect their child is using drugs, should they actually do home tests for drugs? What's your thought?
I think it's great. I think you should have that preliminary conversation with your child, that I'm going to randomly drug test you once in a while. And it's not that I'm punishing you, it's not that I'm not trusting you. It's just that this is how we're going to do it, because I want to know that you're doing good. And if you come up negative, congratulations. But if you come up positive, we're going to have a talk, because there's no drugs allowed in this house. And it's not a breach of your trust between your kid. The fact of the matter is, as a parent, your job is not to be their friend. Your job is to be their parent.
Mhm.
Okay. You can't have to always worry about, "Oh, is my kid gonna like me?" Because in the end, you have to parent your kids. You have to take care of your kids so you could spoil your grandkids. Because if you don't parent your kids, you're gonna wind up parenting your grandkids. So you have to do the right decisions when you have your children, and let them know, "Listen, I'm not your friend, I'm your parent. I love you very, very much, but it's my job to make sure that you're doing the right thing." So I think having that drug test on top of the refrigerator, and having a random drug test once in a blue moon, you might do it once a year, once every 6 months. It's really up to you. But just to let them know in the back of their mind that at any moment they can have that drug test, and their whole entire plot of doing drugs is going to be spoiled.
Which brings me to my next follow-up question is, how would a parent know what kind of drugs their teen is using?
Well, it depends on the drug test you get, because they have I believe a 7 panel and a 13 panel drug test. I would go for the higher panel because there's so many different drugs out there. Um, and when you take the test, it will clearly show you exactly what they're doing. When you take the test, you wait 5 minutes or so, a line will come to whatever drug is positive in their blood. And then if you're not aware of that drug, you could just look it up, Google it on the internet, and it'll tell you every single thing about that drug. I don't think we have enough time on this podcast for me to go through a description of every single drug there is out there, because there's so many. But they're so accessible these days. I mean, the kids can literally buy drugs in grocery stores these days.
And with that, let's take a break and listen to a message from one of our commercial sponsors. And then we'll be right back with Kevin Parker, sobriety coach, and talking about what we can do to prevent teenage drug addiction. Kevin Parker, sobriety coach. As you know, we all need healthy boundaries, especially growing up. What healthy boundaries should a parent establish in their home to prevent drug use?
Well, your child has to know that you're the head of the household, that you're in charge. And the one of the biggest problems that I see that parents do as parents is they set a boundary or they set a threat and they don't follow through with what they say. They say, if you do this, you're going to get punished this way. That person, the kid steps over that line and the parent forgets about that punishment. Now, the child has been programmed that he knows that he or she knows that if you say something, you might not necessarily mean it. One of the biggest boundaries that you have to keep is when you say you're going to do something, or there's going to be some kind of disciplinary act or punishment, that you follow through with it. So don't make any empty promises. Like I said, you put a drug test on top of the refrigerator. You say, listen, I'm gonna sporadically drug test you on occasion. It's nothing against you. So that I want to make sure that there's no drugs in my house. And you know what? Make sure that you do that. If their curfew is 11 p.m. and they come home at 11:30, there has to be some kind of consequences. Maybe that's the time that you give them a drug test. Whatever the case may be, you have to stick to your guns on whatever you decide to do, because kids learn really, really fast where their boundaries are and what they can and cannot do. And they have to know that you have complete control over your household, or they're going to find the loopholes and the different ways that they can bend and manipulate the rules of the house.
And I'm going to ask a follow-up question to that. Should a healthy boundary be no drugs in the house and no friends who do drugs? What are your thoughts on that?
The no drugs in the house is an absolute must rule. The problem is that there are so many kids out there that are doing drugs. There's no way that you're gonna be able to enforce a rule that you're not allowed to have friends that do drugs. Because I would, if we're talking about the high school level, I would say at least 50% of the kids are doing some kind of drugs, alcohol, marijuana, cocaine, ecstasy, whatever it might be. So there's no way that they're going to pick and choose from that thing. But you could be like, there's no drugs allowed in this house. If I see you hanging out with a kid that is clearly high, I'm going to forbid you to hang out with that person. But as far as telling them they can't hang out with people that do drugs, there's really no way to enforce that wholeheartedly.
So, Kevin Parker, sobriety coach, what are the biggest dangers with drug use amongst teens?
Excellent question. So the biggest problem right now that we're facing today is a drug called fentanyl. Fentanyl is the strongest, cheapest, most powerful, dangerous, most addictive drug known to man. It's so cheap that the drug dealers now are cutting every other drug with it to make it stronger so they get more customers. So, for instance, if your kid takes Xanax or painkillers or any kind of pill, these drug dealers are actually putting fentanyl in whatever drug that they're selling, and they have pill makers. They pack the pills, they actually crush them and create the pill, and they have fentanyl in them. So you don't know what you're getting these days. When I was a kid, when you bought a drug, you knew what it was. These days, these dealers are putting whatever they can to get as many customers, to get as strong as it can for the cheapest price. And fentanyl is a super drug, and it's being cut into every other drug. Another big thing is, in America at least, I'm not sure about the UK, but they legalized marijuana. Now every single store is, and it's not, they're not even supposed to do it, but they do it anyway because there's no harsh punishment. They're selling pot, they're selling marijuana out of grocery stores, out of delis, you know. And another big thing is these little vape pens. They have vape pens that have THC in them. Now if you buy them from the store, they're probably relatively safe if they have just THC in them. But if you're buying them from a dealer, they can put whatever they want in those liquids. You don't know what you're smoking. And the kids specifically love these vapes because they're so easy that all you got to do is press a button, you smoke it, and you could blow it out, and you could literally smoke it in a school, and nobody's going to catch you. You smoke it in the hallway and then put it back in your pocket, and it barely smells like anything. So it's so under the radar that these kids are getting it, and they're using it everywhere.
So the Washington Post had an excellent series recently about fentanyl, and they had a link to a photograph of how much was actually a lethal dose of fentanyl. And to describe it for our audience, they had a photograph of a Lincoln penny and just a few grains of fentanyl, like a few, just similar to the size of a few grains of salt. And that would actually kill you.
Yeah, fentanyl is so toxic that if you touch it, you can die.
That is so frightening. So, Kevin Parker, as a parent, if a parent, how does a parent handle a situation if you find out your child is using drugs? What's your advice?
Well, it depends on how you find out. If you find out on your own and they don't tell you, then there definitely has to be some kind of consequences. You need to find out how serious it is. There has to be some kind of reprimand, take away their phone, their social medias, punish them where they're not allowed to come out. If it's a first time offense, if they come to you and say, listen, mom, I tried marijuana for the first time, I'd have that conversation with them and explain to them the dangers of people cutting it and how, especially I'm so against marijuana for kids because it kills, it's not deadly, but it kills kids' motivation and ambition to hit their full potentials. You know, marijuana itself is not going to kill you, but it's going to kill your dreams and it's going to kill your success and it's going to kill your potential. And people don't realize that. But if your kid really has a serious problem, then you need to get a professional on the scene. If it's a drug that they're addicted to, you need to get an interventionist. If you're having difficulty getting them into a program, getting them to agree to go to a rehab facility, and getting them into a follow-up program. There's so many amazing programs out there, but the big thing is to know that Sending your kid to a rehab facility is not the end all cure, because the fact of the matter is there's a 91% relapse rate if you just send your kid to a rehab and think that they're fixed. There needs to be an aftercare program. There needs to be a hiring of a sobriety coach, a recovery coach. There needs to be some kind of AA or NA meetings, or sending them to a PHP program or something of that nature to step them off of that, because it's easy to get sober in a facility. It's easier to get sober when you're locked in a treatment facility. But when you get out, it's the people, places, and things that are the triggers that really make anybody use drugs. So when they get back home, they need a recovery coach or a sobriety coach, or they need some kind of program to implement in their life to help them deal with those daily triggers. But when when you originally find out if your kid is doing drugs, you need to figure out the extent. You need to give them a drug test. You need to figure out what kind of drugs they're using, what's the dangers of them, how addictive they might be, and to really get your kid to open up and be honest about their use. Because if a kid uses once, you need to explain to them the dangers of it. If you know that this is a problem, then you need to send them away. You need to get them into a program. You need to get them some professional help. And I highly recommend getting an interventionist involved, because when it comes to setting up, uh, putting a kid into a program, they know you as mom and dad. They don't know you as a professional in drug or recovery or anything like that. So they're not going to take your words as gospel. They're just going to know you as mom and dad is just telling me what to do. When you get a professional on the scene, there adds another layer of authority and another layer of positioning where this person knows what they're talking about. Maybe I should listen to them.
Now, in your book, Winning Against All Odds, you tell the story about how your family tried multiple times to do interventions just with family members. And the heartbreaking story that you told in your book, Winning Against All Odds, was how when your family did an intervention, you ran away, and it ended up taking so much drugs it almost killed you, and it ended up paralyzing you. So, how critical is it to hire a professional interventionist?
It is absolutely necessary. When the room is not set up right, when the intervention is not orchestrated right, the addict or the family member that you're trying to do the intervention on is going to be able to manipulate the situation, because he knows every single person in that room. He knows how to maneuver. An addict's best skill is its skill to maneuver around, to be comfortable in their life, to continue to use. They'll always find a way to get out, to squirm out of the responsibility of getting clean and stopping and doing what they need to do. When you get an interventionist in the room, it lets them know that they're no longer in charge. It takes the responsibility away from the family, and it puts the authority in with the interventionist. They know how to set up the room, how to set the seats up, how to make sure that everything is set up for optimal success. And when it's done that way, there's a much higher efficacy rate of success.
Right, because your own story is that when your family tried to do it, you ran off and you almost died. So, what you're basically saying, Kevin Parker, is that teens on drugs, and I'm going to use my words because you didn't use this word, they're liars and they're master manipulators.
Yes.
Yeah. So, what resources are there to treat your teen from addiction and create a solid recovery?
Well, there's so many different resources out there. At first, I would start with an interventionist to set up some kind of plan, get them into a program. But there's detox centers. Detox centers are 5 to 7 day treatment facilities in which it'll help them remove the drugs from their system. And then from a detox facility, you would send them to a rehab which is typically 30 days to 90 days. And in that program, they'll get therapy, they'll get group sessions, they'll get all the things necessary. Maybe they'll learn about the 12 steps. Going forward, there's partial hospitalization programs, is where they report to a hospital for 3 to 5 hours a day, and they go through intense therapy and all these different kind of classes. There's halfway houses if the environment in the household is not a good fit for them to get sober. You can send your loved one to a halfway house or a sober home, and there's a manager there that will teach them skills and tools and responsibilities and get them to start living a sober life. And there will be a bunch of sober people in the house that they can hang out with that have like-minded goals and are heading in the same direction. One of my favorite, I'm kind of biased because it's what I do, but I find that recovery coaching is very, very powerful because it's a one-on-one, fully customizable, multifaceted approach to meet the addict exactly where they are and bring them to exactly where they want to go. That's a really, really good option. But the most powerful one that I've seen, and it's another thing that I do with the Addictions Academy, is something called sober companion work. So a sober companion coach is somebody that's a live-in coach. Now, you wouldn't necessarily do this with somebody that's underage because of the issues there, but to have somebody come into the house uh, for 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day and chaperone the person that is struggling with addiction and help them deal with the real life problems and the triggers in real life time as they go through their day is very, very powerful.
So great information. And with that, let's take a break and listen to one of our commercial sponsors here at UK Health Radio. You're listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 bestselling author. And we're listening to sobriety coach Kevin Parker. We'll be right back. So Kevin Parker, recovery coach, everything that you're talking about sounds very intensive and also very expensive. And as we all know, as I know from my work as a medical intuitive healer, you can't get anybody to do anything they don't want to do. How do you motivate a drug addicted teenager to get off drugs?
That's the key question right there. And like we spoke about earlier, every single human makes a decision from the avoidance of pain and the obtainment of pleasure. Once them using is more painful than it is pleasurable, then they'll make the decision to get better. So that's why interventionists are such a powerful tool in this process, because we squeeze all the other options. We take away all of the pleasures in life, whether it be their phone, whether it be their car, whether it be their Xbox or PlayStation 3, or the money that they're getting, or whatever we can leverage and squeeze their life to the point that living the way that it is so miserable that they want the help that you're offering. Because when you do an intervention, you say, listen, you have two options. I can't force you to do anything. You can take our hand, go to a facility, get the help you need, work a recovery program. You'll have all the love, the support, anything that you need. We're here for you. Or you can continue to do drugs. You're not going to have the love. You're not going to have the support. We're not going to give you money. You're not going to have a phone. You're not going to have a TV. You're not going to have a video games, a computer, whatever. You're going to have a bed in a room, and that's it. And if they're older than 18, I usually threaten to change the locks. And it's not, and that's a that's a big line that a lot of uh parents have, is like, oh, if I kick my kid out, what's going to happen? They're going to die on the street. They're more likely to die in your house than they are going to die on the street. If you have to make their life so difficult while they're using drugs, that the only way that they could see that their life being pleasurable is by getting help. You need to take away all of the pleasures, all of the extra things that are making them comfortable. Because if an addict is comfortable, they will use drugs for the rest of their life. Once it becomes so uncomfortable and they can't take it anymore, then they make the decision to stop using drugs. That's why they say every addict has to hit rock bottom. Well, um, as a drug interventionist, we make them hit rock bottom quicker. We take away all the pleasures in their life and we make them feel like they hit rock bottom if they continue to use drugs. And the only other option, which is the good option, is go to a treatment, work a program, and you can continue having all the pleasures in life.
So truly life-saving information, Kevin Parkner. Now, as you know, drug addiction doesn't happen in a vacuum, and children or family members are part of a family system. How can a parent tell if they themselves are enabling drug use?
Well, if you're aware that your kid is doing drugs and you're not doing something about it, you're enabling them. Because behind every addict, there's an even sicker person enabling them in every situation. Because, like we've just spoke about before, an addict does drugs in a comfortable environment. Somebody is helping them and providing this comfortable environment. Usually it's the mom or the dad. Because the parents are usually the last person to actually admit that their kid has a problem. Like, if you were to read in my book, my parents were in denial until I was like 23 years old. And I was doing drugs since I was 9.
That's shocking. Now, what steps can a parent take to help build a psychologically healthy child to prevent them getting hooked on drugs in the first place?
Well, to a big thing is having open communication. Being able to have a healthy, safe space and environment to have conversations with your kids, because your kids are curious. It's a whole new world out there. Like, literally everything to them is a new experience. They're going out there and they're trying new things and they're seeing what they like. And you want to be able to be the parent that they can come to when they try marijuana or they drink alcohol for the first time. You want to make sure that they're comfortable and know that they're not going to be shamed, that they're not going to be beaten. There's not going to be this horrible thing. There needs to be an open communication line. And also, you need to figure out what makes your child happy. What brings them pleasure in their lives? What kind of activities do they like? What kind of experiences do they want? What is their goals? What are their needs? Because the fact of the matter, truly happy people don't do drugs. If you're truly happy and you're truly content and you're truly satiated in life, you don't need drugs. So the key is to figure out what are the needs of your children and find ways to help them get those needs met. If they need connection, get them involved with some people. Get them involved with groups, get them involved with clubs. If they need significance, find out what they're really good at and help them dive deep into that and get as good as they can at that so they feel significant. If they like variety and excitement, let them experience new things. Take them on little trips, adventures, vacations. Go here, go there. Let them explore the world and see things. You know, if they need certainty, if they feel a little uncomfortable, they have anxiety, make sure they have a comfortable home to come home to, that when they come home, it's not full of anxiety and traumatic events and people yelling and screaming and all of these different things. Know your child, know what their needs are, and get those needs met in a conducive way for success and happiness. Very, very important.
Great information. Now, Kevin Parker, in your professional opinion, what is the best way to deter your child from using drugs?
Well, the best way is for them to be aware of the um the effects of drugs. They need to know what it can do. That's why watching a movie, reading a book, reading an article, going to a Scared Straight event, having them understand what the damage it does, not only to themselves, but to their family, to their friends, to their lives. Very, very important for them to understand what they're getting into and what they're throwing away. And the second thing that's most important is letting them know that you're the parent and you have supervision of what they're actually doing. Like I said, a lot of parents don't like to invade in the privacy of their children. And I'm not an advocate of stalking and going through your kid's phone or going through their social medias or doing all these different things. But in my professional opinion, you should have access to all of these things. You should have the passcode to your child's phone. You should have the passwords to the the social medias that they're doing, because you never know what's going on. And you should have a drug test in the house. And if all of these things are set in place, they're going to be very weary into stepping into that realm of doing drugs on a consistent basis.
How do we have a drug talk with our children so they never start using? I mean, my parents gave me a drug talk way back in the day, and I'm 63. But what kind of drug talk do kids today need?
Oh, explain to them that it's a very extensive talk that you would have to have, but I think it would have to go out in stages, because the first stage is usually alcohol and marijuana and things like that. And that talk would really go like, listen, I know that alcohol and marijuana are legal, and I know you can get them in stores, but the fact is that they do destroy your life. You may be able to smoke and drink one night and have a good time, but you also might get really, really sick and make a fool of yourself while you're drunk, or something really bad might happen to you. Maybe you might get assaulted or physically or mentally or sexually abused in some kind of fashion because you got too drunk and you weren't able to handle yourself. Explain to them that pot, yeah, it can't kill you, but it kills your dreams. It kills your motivation. It kills your will to want to go any further. It makes you content with whatever you have, and it makes sure that you don't thrive in life. It takes away all of your opportunities, all of your full potential. And it may not kill you, but it kills how far you're going to go in life.
And
Then when you get it,
Kevin
yes.
Parker, I want to throw this in. In my work as a medical intuitive healer, so many people of all ages come to me and they think that marijuana isn't bad for you. Your brain is supposed to be soft like jello. Marijuana literally hardens your brain and it scrambles your brain waves. It makes you stupid. So continue.
Yeah, I know. I smoked pot all throughout high school, and I was a very smart kid, but it stole a lot from me. I didn't do any of my homework. I didn't do any of the things that I had to do. I just got by doing my tests and getting good grades. Luckily, I was a very smart kid, but not everybody's in that same boat, and it really does mess with your growth. It messes with your capability to grow as far as your intelligence, as far as your potential. It just stumps your growth in all aspects. It does no good for you. I don't care what the laws are in the country that you live in. Marijuana really kind of destroys people's lives, and I'm very, very firm in that. Especially with kids.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you talked about it stunting your growth. What a lot of young people don't realize is your brain doesn't finish developing until you're about 25 or 26. And when you're taking all these drugs, they literally interfere with your brain development, which is going to affect every aspect of your health.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're talking about the drug talk. I'm getting passionate myself. It's like, don't do drugs. Okay, I said it. Go on.
So, and then after you have that conversation about drugs, marijuana and alcohol, you have to have the more serious talk about the other drugs out there, about powder drugs, about pill drugs, about the fact that they could put absolutely anything in there, and explain to them about fentanyl. Pull up an article, show them that 3 little teeny grains of fentanyl can kill you, and that the drug dealers are putting it in all different types of drugs because it's so cheap and so strong, and it's the best thing for the dealer because their drugs are so powerful and they're made so cheap, and they don't care if you die, because you know what happens when a drug dealer sells a drug and somebody overdoses on it. All the actual addicts are like, man, that's where the strong stuff is, and they buy even more. That's how sick addiction is. They think, oh, it's not going to be me that's going to die. That person just couldn't handle their stuff. So it's just set up for failure, especially these days. Powder drugs, pill drugs, all of these different drugs can be laced with fentanyl, with God knows what kind of things, angel dust, PCP, things that you don't even want to see. And there's so many synthetic drugs out there that will create permanent psychosis that is completely unreversible. Like spices and bath salts will literally make you go crazy, and there's no turning back. You could do it once and forever be in psychosis.
So, Kevin Parker, sobriety coach, we really appreciate your service to humanity. Any final thoughts for our audience?
I'm just really glad that you guys stayed here for the podcast, and I hope you guys learned something here. The one thing that I really want to stress is just be aware of what your kids are doing. Be aware of their personalities, be aware of their behaviors, and always have some kind of deterrent there to make them second guess those choices, because there's so many opportunities out there to get drugs. Everywhere you go, you're not going to be able to keep your kids away from drugs completely. They're going to have to be able to make their decision and say no, whether it's in peer groups, whether it's in schools, in stores, whatever the case may be. They're going to be exposed to drugs, and they have to be able to say no. So it's your job to deter them from doing that.
Thank you so much. You've been listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 best-selling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. And part of the reason I run this radio show is that natural healing works so much better than all the drugs, legal and illegal. Our guest today has been the one and only Kevin Parker, sobriety coach, certified interventionist, family coach, author of Winning Against All Odds. And you can find out more about Kevin Parker and his life-changing work at his website, truewarriorsuccess.com. And remember, when you do drugs, it hurts your brain and affects every aspect of your well-being. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.